Welcome back to Season 7 of the ReidConnect-Ed podcast, co-hosted by myself, licensed psychologist Dr. Gerald Reid, and my sister, educational therapist Alexis Reid. Today, we are honored to have with us Dr. Maryanne Wolf, one of the leading experts on reading and literacy, to educate us on the history, neuroscience, and instruction of reading with a focus on the science of reading and dyslexia.
So our relationship with reading as human beings is quite complex. We may expect that reading just comes online for children at a certain age, or that certain learners are either good readers or not. However, there's so much more to developing this intricate neural circuitry than just that. Reading must be explicitly taught, modeled, nurtured, and supported. As the ability to make meaning from our interactions with text develops, the information and stories we consume develop our brains in expansive ways. As a society, some may think that reading is an important rite of passage and skill to learn and practice. And others might be noticing a trend that reading might not be as popular as it has been in the past. On social media, you may see, or at least I do, reading enthusiasts or celebrities like Ryan Holiday, Reese Witherspoon, or our friend and musician and former podcast guest, Shane Sager, showcasing the allure and joy of reading. There seems to be a movement to return to more analog approaches to accessing stories and information. However, in 2025, YouGov had a poll that revealed that while 60% of American adults read at least one book, 40% reported that they didn't read a single book all year. Is reading becoming an antiquated approach to engage with information? What is our role in the battle to bring back reading? Researchers around the world have been showing scientific evidence about the importance of developing regions of the brain related to reading, because strengthening these networks also helps us become critical and deep thinkers, problem solvers, strengthens sustained attention, elicits creativity, pattern recognition, comprehension skills, helps us gain new perspectives, and even build empathy, just to name a few. With assistive technologies and innovations in science-based approaches to creating access to text, learners have options for immersing themselves in literature, stories, poems, and information. Especially for young people learning to read, we adults play an important role in how the development of and love for reading unfolds. Our guest today happens to be one of the leading experts in the science of reading. She's a renowned cognitive neuroscientist, scholar, and advocate for children's literacy, best known for her research on the reading brain, dyslexia, and the impact of digital technology on reading.
With us today is Dr. Maryanne Wolf. She's a scholar, a teacher, and an advocate for children and literacy around the world. She is the director of the newly created Center for Dyslexia, Diverse Learners, and Social Justice at the UCLA Graduate School of Education and Information Studies. Previously, she was at the John D. Biagio Professor of Citizenship and Public Service and Director of the Center for Reading and Language Research in the Elliott Pearson Department of Child Study and Human Development at Tufts University. Dr. Wolf obtained her doctoral degree in human development and psychology at Harvard University. She is the author of many books, including Proust and the Squid, The Story and Science of the Reading Brain, Dyslexia, Fluency, and the Brain, as well as Reader, Come Home, The Reading Brain in a Digital World. Welcome to the ReidConnect-Ed podcast, and we're so happy and honored to have you today, and we just love the energy that you're bringing to the podcast today.
Oh, what fun it is to be with you both, Jerry and Alexis. And it's a joy to be back in Boston. I have to say, I love the fact that I left 80 degrees when I came to 0 degrees in New England. But I truly miss the spirit here. So it's truly my pleasure to be with you both. And you're doing such good work that how could I say no?
Thank you. I hope the hot tea warms you up. For sure.
Yeah, I need it.
Well, one of the things that I want to bring up is there's a quote in your book, and it just totally blew my mind. You know, this is not a topic especially, well-versed in, but your book, you said, reading is the single most remarkable human invention that you've come across. And I kept thinking, invention. She's using the word invention about reading. That's fascinating.
Oh, Jerry, you are actually coming close to the first sentence in Proust and the Squid, and it is, we were never born to read. And just as Alexis hinted at in her introduction, and what you're really pulling from me is the fact that reading, literacy itself, numeracy, these are not things that are genetically programmed in our brain.
Wow.
Language, vision, cognition, all of that's a genetic program. You put a child anywhere and they will develop those. And so people think that because oral language is natural and genetically endowed and will just unfold, that reading, written languages, it's anything but the case. And the reality is that our brain, for any cognitive invention, it could be knitting or bicycle riding, any invention requires a new circuit. But complex inventions like reading and numeracy require complex connections among parts that are developing genetically. So what's fascinating to me is that reading is something new for the species. Numeracy and reading are new. When we think of how old our brains are, we're really talking about something that began more or less 6,000 years ago. That's nothing in the species history. But there is something that the brain does have that is genetically endowed that allows reading. And that it has this almost semi-miraculous ability to make new connections among old parts. I mean, when I think about all of us getting older, wouldn't that be nice in general to have that principle be ours? Well, okay, but it is a species gift that we as a species can make new connections for new inventions, which is why when we look at reading, we look at both the very positive aspects that it could exist, but the slightly negative is that it will change because it's plastic. So the invention itself determines the beginnings that elaborate over time, but the plasticity means depending on the language, you will have slightly different circuits. The circuit for reading will be sharing similar components like vision and language and cognition and affect. Very important to always add affect. But the reality is Chinese or Japanese kanji will require more visual real estate, if you will. So you will have much more going on in parts of the brain for visual memory for a Chinese or a Japanese kanji than you have in English. But an alphabet will require much more of the phonological, the sound system. So you're going to have similarities and differences. But I will add a third element to our story that we'll be talking about today, and Alexis hinted at it. We're changing. And we're changing in reading because that circuit is going to be matching or reflecting the characteristics of the medium it's reading upon. So we read differently on papyrus, but we read differently on an iPad. We read very much more differently on a laptop than we do a book.
Can you explain what you mean by we read differently?
We have that same circuit. Now here, actually, I'm going to use Alexis's work on executive processing here because I know a lot of your listeners are more familiar with the fact that attention is one of the most important aspects for any cognitive skill. What do we give attention to? What is the relationship between attention and memory? Well, I'm going to get too fast into complexity here, so I'm going to say it in as simple way as possible, and then we'll get more complex over time.
Good.
But the reality is that we have this very beautiful circuit for reading that begins with attention, our different attentional systems. We have to let go, we have to inhibit what came behind. So what all that Alexis talks about in executive processing, we are using those skills in reading at the beginning to set it up. And when you set it up for print or for anything with reading, it begins, of course, it goes through all this visual system connecting to language. Now, here's the beauty of print. Attention, when you have time, goes to not what we just call comprehension, but to what I call deep reading processes. Now, this gets really, it's beautiful actually.
I agree.
But the first child is connecting their letters and their sounds to meaning, and that's great. But as that child gets older and the circuit begins to elaborate with ever more sophisticated things that they're reading, the sophistication of our cognitive, linguistic, and affective processes get hooked up to that circuit. That's gorgeous. But now with print, you have the time to attend to analogical thinking. Now, what the heck is that? Well, you know this, but a lot of the world doesn't. Every human being is making analogies between what they know already and what's in front of them. In reading, we're making a beautiful connection with what is that reading changing in what we know. Does it support it? Is it different? Well, in making that decision, when we are reading in print, we have time. This is the important point. We have time to activate inference. What is really the import of this connection between what I know and what the author of that other perspective wants me to think? Inference is not just mystery writing. It's an ability to figure out what is the intention of the material. Now, that brings us to something that is so often neglected when we talk about comprehension. Alexis, you and Jerry know all this, but I want the world to know that one of the most important aspects is empathy. The ability to leave your perspective. Those of you who know your Piaget, you are moving from an egocentric perspective into thinking about what the other thinks and feels. Now, in a novel, it can be not only what that character is like, what their character thinks and feels, it gives you a whole new perspective from another human, another historical epoch, another religion. You are passing over, leaving your perspective, taking on two forms of empathy. Now, this is where your question is really landing us into the middle of the reading brain circuit, because it's not just one form of empathy, which is, do we feel something? No, it is a combination of Machiavelli and Charlotte's Web.
Yeah.
And I really mean this because Machiavelli was in The Prince is really teaching us how when we think about others, we are thinking about what they think. So cognitive empathy is our ability to take on the thoughts of the author, the thoughts of the other. Whereas affective empathy, literally our limbic system, we are beginning to learn how to feel what others feel. Whether we call that compassion or empathy, it is an inordinately important and too often neglected aspect of deep reading. Now, before you tell me the next question, that's just the beginning of the deep reading processes that then come all together, always interactive. Everything is interactive, coming here, going there. It contributes to our ability to think critically. So when we think critically, we're not just thinking, we're feeling, we're making inference, and we're making an evaluation of truth. Here's where the ability to evaluate truth has never been more important in the era of ChatGPT or Claude or anybody else, where you think because you have outsourced and they know more than you do, you cannot evaluate without this developing critical thinking. Now, the reason why the medium is important is about time. The attention to all of these deep reading processes requires time. What we have done is become skimmers. So the medium has these characteristics that actually encourage and a psychological set towards moving along. And so we end up skimming the surface of the information and don't necessarily, unless we are really trying hard, we don't necessarily go into those deep reading processes. Now, there's one more, and I'll end this section, but this part of our talk sets us up for understanding the reading brain circuit. That's what comes out of your question. What is happening? You have all these things, these deep reading processes, and if you have really learned how to do this, it opens you up to, I call it the reading sanctuary. Proust called it the place where we go beyond the wisdom of the author to discover our own. That is the reading brain circuitry that we either use because our attention gives us the time to do this, or we simply have enough attention to get the gist of it, and there will be implications aplenty. So your one question I used, the audience doesn't know this. You cannot believe the list of questions that this wonderful man gave me. So I am trying to put about 4 responses in one, lest you be with me till your supper time.
Bravo.
Well done. It's so beautifully integrated. And it makes me think of so many things. First of all, this idea of skimming and being so surface level. And it's a shame that I feel most relationships in life are really just on the surface lately. Yeah. Right? And it's very interesting. I never thought about how we are skimming the surface of what we're reading. And we're also not like opening ourselves up to the vulnerability and the potential connection of really get to know like what's underneath the surface of people we interact
until
with.
Until they come to therapy.
Until they come to therapy, probably, yeah.
And therapy is a good way to leave yourself.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Yeah.
But, you know, and also to this emotional side of reading and developing reading in our brains, David Rose, our friend and colleague, he always says that teaching and learning is so emotional.
It is.
Right? And if we lose that aspect of the process, we lose this deeper sense of learning and developing the circuitry in our brains. And I just want to make one other note, because I'm sure you have a lot of things to say just about that alone. But if for the UDL enthusiasts who think about how the principles are set up with different regions of the brain, you made such an important point that our whole brain is connected.
Yes.
And firing across dimensions.
Exactly,
it's not just happening in one place. And this is why, especially in UDL terms, we think about the affective network.
Absolutely.
To be able to be engaged and motivated and connected to the learning. And I see this so often with young people.
Yes.
You know, across the lifespan, to be quite honest, from very young learners all the way up to college and graduate age, if they don't see the connection, the purpose, the why of what they're engaging with, it's very difficult for them to have more than that surface level of interaction with what they're learning.
I've got about 3 or 4 things I want to say, and I'll try to restrict them to 2. One is the quickest because it never occurred to me until a very, very intelligent young person came to me and said, I read your book. I felt like it was talking to me because I have become a skimmer. He said, but I never realized it bleeds over to my relationships.
Wow, just like what you said.
And I had never thought of that, Alexis, ever. And he said, really, I just skim across my relationships. He said, and he even went to this, he said, including my sexuality. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what a thought that I have never had myself. But of course, that is what reading does in and of itself. It generates, your insights go beyond the author. Well, he went way beyond me in this understanding that he had become a skimmer of life. There's a Korean philosopher who lives in Berlin, and his name is Han Byung-chul. And he writes many books, but he wrote a book called The Scent, The Smell, The Scent of time in which he said, we have become so accelerated in our relationship to the world, to almost all these different aspects. He didn't use the word skim, but he used psychological and philosophical terms to say that we are so busy moving from one stimulus to the next, whether it's in reading or how we are with people or what we're in life, that we don't linger. And he uses the term linger.
Oh, wow.
We don't linger between our perceptions of the world. And in so doing, we have lost the contemplative. We have lost the stillness. And he said, he went on to say something beautiful. He said, I wish we could think about God as the God of stillness, the God who gives us the contemplative capacity that we possess but don't use.
And it's not a catchphrase. It's something deeper than that.
So
beautiful,
much deeper than that. And I hope people actually, that book was more than 10 years ago. He's written even books on hyperculture. But it's that principle that we do not linger and therefore we do not perceive reality at that moment. And he's never heard of me. He will, no matter how I will try to write him, he doesn't answer anybody, or he certainly doesn't answer me. But I hope someday to meet him to say, the reading brain supports everything that you are writing philosophically. And that in an age of AI, where not that the if you will, we have used our natural tendency to want to be efficient. We have replaced effort and thought with the desire for efficiency. And in so doing, the very effort that literally builds the circuitry, elaborates the reading brain circuitry, is lost. It's becoming atrophying over time. So the more we outsource, the more rely on other, the less we make the efforts that go into, I go back to Alexis and memory. We do not have the same memory.
Yeah.
So this is what, but I have one last thing that I cannot not say it, because it's about empathy and what you said. Part of my life is science and the other part is literature. And I will never forget the author, Jane Smiley, the novelist, who was asked whether the novel is going to die. And she said, no, I do not believe it'll die, but it will be sidelined. And when it's sidelined, which is what you're saying about the crises of reading, not just in the United States, one book, we're lucky. Our students are not reading one book in high school. That's college after college, we're finding this out. Not one single book. But what she said was, when we don't have people who read books, when we don't have leaders who don't read books, they will fail to develop the empathy necessary to lead a people who respect the lives of others.
Wow.
And then the other novelist who commented was Marilyn Robinson in an interview with Barack Obama. And he called her the ambassador of empathy or something like that. And she said, the greatest threat to democracy is the tendency to call others the enemy. So here you have two novelists who are talking about the absolute importance of empathy, not just for the individual, but for the society and for the leaders of society and for democracy itself. If you do not respect and give dignity to the perspectives of others, but call them enemy because they don't agree with you, you will lose the very essence of a democratic society. So here's where deep reading and democracy just come right together.
Well, I think, humanity is also in there too.
Absolutely.
We're losing pieces of humanity. And, one of the things that I do like about digital technology and the interconnectedness that we're able to see and learn from others is
just
that,
like this.
Right.
This.
We're not just in our own communities anymore. We get to see outside, but we have to choose to interact and learn from others. But in literature, in stories, in interviews that you read or interact with, newspaper articles, we get to see different parts of humanity that we might not see or interact with every day. And this is where, gaining differences in perspective or learning empathy or even relating to an experience, a character, or even like tangentially something that a character has experienced is so valuable and important. And I was thinking about you yesterday, not just in preparation for today, but also a college student of mine. We were talking about reading, and she said, in my classes, I'm just kind of skimming through the readings because I show up for class and I don't really need them to be prepared because the teacher's just teaching and talking at me instead of the contribution of our intellectual wisdom and collaboration. And she said, I was thinking about how in high school I read this book, and it was about an African-American who was telling his story, and I was so moved by it because it's so different from my life.
Her own life.
And she said, it resonated so deeply, and I felt such empathy out of compassion, but also out of like being able to understand somebody so different than her. And it was such a beautiful moment.
Wonderful.
And it was ironic that it happened this week because I was going to see you today, but it was just, it reinvigorated my enthusiasm and excitement for young people's wanting for these experiences that I think sometimes gets lost. So, young people sometimes get a bad rap.
Yes, they do.
And Jerry and I are constantly trying to bring forth these really intimate, beautiful conversations we have the privilege of having in our practices and getting to know young people on a different level. But there's this wanting for these experiences. And in your book, two quick things I'll say. One is, if you are a skimmer and you're reading, reader, come home. Do not end in the middle. Please keep going. Because I actually found myself wanting and waiting for the contemplative part.
Yes.
And it comes at the end.
At the
Spoiler alert. But
yes, it is. It's
Nicely said.
But
true.
I was really, I was waiting for it, and I knew it was coming. And
that's so funny.
And I just sat with it, and it kind of like came over me and just felt like a big hug.
Oh, that's so
and
wonderful.
Remembrance and reminders of the importance of kind of like, again, like I'm saying, just sitting with what you're reading and thinking about how it makes sense in your life. And honestly, this is what this podcast is about. Yeah. It's kind of, we call it like an a la carte situation, like pick and choose what you think might be helpful for you to learn about and see how it relates to your own life and see what to do next from there. Yeah. But the book was so beautiful in that way. And I think it's so important for us to slow down, and I'm guilty of this too. I think we all are.
Oh yeah.
I'm glad you shared that story of the author you just mentioned. Forgive me,
Jane Smiley.
No,
Marilyn Robinson,
the Korean.
Hong Boon-chul.
Yeah, because I've been really fascinated, and I certainly don't know enough about it, but I've been really fascinated with Japanese culture and wabi-sabi. This idea of perfectly imperfect.
Yes.
And remembering that the seasons are meant to kind of like give us pause to check in and move forward. And in your book, you say, I think one of the most beautiful things, hearkening back to your studies as a literature student and thinking about how libraries and books, if we go back to them, it's like visiting our friends.
They are our friends.
Visiting different parts of our life.
It's true.
And it reminds me of in one of my favorite movies, Almost Famous, when they say, you could put on a record and hang out with your friends. And I thought the same about your reminder of this. And I think we lose all of these beautiful parts of reading and, to be honest, of humanity and life.
Yes.
In the rush of just doing more and pushing further. And, anyways.
I'll just say one thing, then I'm going to ask Jerry for a question. I'm going to turn the tables on him. But I have to tell you a little tiny backstory on what you just said. I wanted that last letter. The book is full of, it's an epistolary book. It's letters because in 2018, we were on the threshold of understanding, I think. Now we understand so much more about what digital culture does. But I made the letter so that people would take their knowledge base, just like what we were saying about analogy, to this is my knowledge base. These are my conclusions. I did not realize those conclusions, or predictions, if you will, would be so supported by the evidence. But the last letter, what you said, was the most important to me. And there was a moment when the editors said, we don't want the last letter because we want the reader just to take it off and do their own contemplation. I said, the most important thing for me is to actually meet that reader as fully as I can. And the last chapter, the last letter, is my effort to say, you are my good reader. If you've lasted to the 9th chapter or letter, you are my good reader. And these are my best thoughts to give you for your best thoughts. And the whole book requires something. It's so curious. You said, don't skim. The whole book requires a term that not everyone has ever heard of. I invented it in a certain sense, but it's what we all possess, and that is there is a quality of what I call cognitive patience.
I love that.
That allows us to linger with a thought. And reading is thought. Deep reading is deep thinking. Deep writing, the work of John Warner these days, it's a book called More Than Words. And it's about what it takes for us to get to the point where we have slowed ourselves down enough to reach what I call this sanctuary. This actually, Gis Jin uses the term, the place of interiority. She's a dear friend and novelist. The place of interiority where we can use that cognitive patience to get there, but we can use it to linger there and just stay with our thoughts and actually not be lonely. There's such loneliness in our culture, and that's where we know that other people whom we are reading about have had the same thoughts or worse thoughts, worse experience, better experiences, but others. And we will, and actually that is what I keep coming back to Proust. He said, reading is that fertile miracle of communication that takes place in the midst of solitude. And here we are, totally alone, when we really read that level, and we aren't alone. We're with that author's thoughts. Even if that author died 500 years ago, there is something of a connection. And so now that is my segue to turn to Jerry and say, in your practice, how do you feel that my worries about society actually being more and more unconnected to each other, do you feel that in your practice? Does your practice reflect that? Talk to me about my worries about connections.
Well, I wanted to use one of my questions that I'm allowed to ask you, but I'll save it for later because I know I have a quota.
Oh, okay.
But the way to answer that question is when we slow things down in therapy, which I think is essentially what happens in therapy, everything becomes slower. And people who have reflected back on their work with me, they would say, you didn't tell me what to do. You helped me to discover myself. And to me, that is the best gift any therapist can give to someone is helping someone to kind of rediscover their true nature and their authentic self and understand their patterns and then decide what to do with that. And usually people make pretty healthy decisions once they go through that process. But I think that people often will say things like, oh, I never thought of that. Oh, wow, that just popped in my head for the first time.
Yeah.
So I think it reflects everything that you're saying. I'll save my question. I'll turn into a comment that I was going to ask you before. But I'm comparing and contrasting reading and deep reading to looking on a screen or watching a show or binge watching a show or watching a movie. And what you said sounds really important, is that when you read, you have time to think. And when you have time to think, you can actually imagine, what was that person thinking? When you're watching a reel on Instagram or a TV show or a movie, people are talking. And I was thinking about this like a month ago. I was watching a movie. I'm like, it's funny how like movies find a way to have people say such precise things that people don't really say in real life in like the precise moment. Like everything is like, it's like, oh, we're trying to understand what they're thinking, because there's no thought bubble. There's no like inner monologue that you get in movies that you would get in reading, where you can stop and think, oh, what is that person thinking? What's their inner monologue? You don't get that in movies or in video. And so it's funny how movies almost try to like correct for that by having them say the perfect thing.
Precise,
that reflects their inner monologue, but it's still not enough to truly, as you're saying, pause and say, wait, what is that person thinking, and what is their inner monologue that's written on this page? Because books will have inner monologue. That's
it's a whole different. There's a wonderful line from the Italian novelist Italo Calvino that writing requires this extraordinary, arduous effort to find the mot juste, the perfect single word that will capture the thought. And when you're writing, you are actually pushed by seeing it there. You're pushed to write again, to find the ever more perfect, ever more precise articulation of your inner thoughts. And so writing gives you that, and that person, the screenwriter, hopes to actually capture that so that you could see and hear the monologue from the expressions. But reading gives you a chance to think about it. And film is evanescent. And I love film. I relax at night from all kinds of ways, but I find good writers of series, and I'll follow the writer, because just of what you're saying, a good writer gives me that precise articulation of thought. But reading gives you something that, and even though I will always want film, always want the visual and the audio, all this is so important. But reading gives you a chance to go back. And there's something in the science of reading called comprehension monitoring. And it means that you don't even know, but you actually have spatial skills, capacities when you're reading that you don't know. They are useless on a screen. There's no spatial on a screen. You have an evanescent entity that is constantly moving, and you're moving with it. But when you're reading, you control time and space.
Oh, fascinating.
And you can go back, and people ask me, what when you said this, and I'm saying, okay, back about a third away through, lower, probably the bottom of the page on the left. Now, I can do that for books, and there's no perception that I have of it, but it's this, you do not realize you have a tactile, haptic, and spatial aspect to reading that print gives you, and helps memory. Actually, it helps memory.
Yeah.
But you don't do that with the screen. And you also don't do it with audio. I prefer, if you have a Goldilocks effect, the Goldilocks is print, next is audio, next is Kindle, then next is iPad, and then next is your laptop, because it's all about attention, distraction as you go up the line. The more distraction possible, the less likely you can get to deep reading and understand what you might miss. So in that whole line of different mediums, the one with the print gives you the most opportunities for the most ways to conserve in memory.
Yeah, so real quick, I just want to make this point, is that I heard in relation to what you're saying is that movies are now being made where things have to move quickly in order to maintain people's attention.
It's the distraction.
Yeah.
It's the age of a distraction.
So to your point, you can't first of all, you can't go back and like kind of reread and like contemplate so much to what you're saying. But so it's kind of the opposite of what you're saying is take your time and digest what's going on and put yourself in their shoes and don't just move on to the next scene because you're not going to be able to truly digest that one scene.
And you will have such differences in cultures. And I've been reading, not just reading Han Byung-chul, the Korean philosopher, but I've been very invested in understanding Korean culture. I just went there. Actually, I went there to worry about the fact they're digitizing kids' materials from third grade on, and I'm saying, no, don't do this. So, but I watch what are called Korean dramas, or I'm very interested in Japanese and Chinese. But what happens in those series is so different from an American series, just as what you're saying. This is not true across the board. This is when there are certain writers I really appreciate, but it's elongated. Things don't just happen. Just think of how relationships in American movies.
Yeah.
It's completely different. I joke with my sister, who really is an expert in all of this, and I say, Karen, it takes 10 episodes before the protagonist kisses.
I think about that all the time,
it's
actually.
really amazing to me that you have such a different relationship to time inside relationship in different cultures. And so your comment is a beautiful one, because I think we have lost and what Han Byung-chul said, in an accelerated culture, we have lost our ability to use time in front of us. It's constantly on the move. In an accelerated period, we don't have, and it goes back to cognitive patience, and then in reading, you don't have time. Now, audio, I want to rescue audio, especially with dyslexia. My son, who's dyslexic, has only read my books through audio, right? And so I very much appreciate what audio can do. But by and large, the monitoring of comprehension isn't going to happen. You can rewind, but you don't.
So
just don't.
Yeah. And first of all, I'm a big fan of teaming audio with a print text. For me,
interesting.
I find it really helpful. It guides and helps me prioritize where I want to pause. It helps me to hear and see at the same time. But I will say, we always go back to the context. Depending on the context, a different scaffold or support might be necessary to even engage in the text. And in this age of AI, especially with executive function challenges that I primarily work with, I find that a lot of young people just aren't even engaging in text.
Yeah.
So my entry point is, hey, can we find a summary first so you have a context, a foundation to work from?
Yeah.
Because this idea, and the thing I love about reading too, is that there is this idea of sequence and predictability. So if you have something to be working from, familiarity with the vocabulary and the characters, it's an on-ramp to be able to engage in a story or a text. And, audio, using the screens, I think the biggest fear for me with using screens as I sit with an iPad in my lap is going back to what you were saying before about attention and executive systems, that our brains have a very difficult time filtering out extraneous information.
Oh, yeah.
Sensorily, like when we have access to different things, or if we're used to responding quickly to every notification, flashing light, or thing that comes into our purview, it's very difficult just to sit with what's in front of us.
Right.
And I think that, like you said, it impacts memory. It impacts so many things. And I have conversations every day where students are like, well, I read this book.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, well, tell me about it. What did you think about this aspect of so-and-so's, life or the plot, or when this happened? And they have a very difficult time retrieving. So I'm constantly, I do a lot of psychoeducation with the people I work with, and the educators especially, that, we need time to pause and encode what we're reading instead of just moving on. And I think that's the fear with digital text, right? Of course, with my accessibility background and friends, they would be very angry if I didn't talk about the importance and value of having digital access, because there are some learners who absolutely need it. And we want to build skills across the board. It's the same with AI, right? As I mentioned, I have a lot of reservations about AI. We have a whole episode on the ethics of AI.
Oh, good.
But also thinking about how it is supportive and sometimes necessary for people, especially with disabilities, to access or to start. But I always say it's an on-ramp. It's not necessarily everything. And we need to build these cognitive skills.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, we're losing so much.
So again, you have, both of you keep having these sparkling activation periods where I'm thinking, oh, stop. Let me put it on a finger to remember to comment, because you've got so many things that make me very excited. But let me just mention two of them. So one is, you referred to sequence and detail. And one of the major studies that is going on these are researchers in what's called the European e-Read Network. And Megan in Norway, the Salmeron in Barcelona. They do what are called meta-analyses, which you know, but your listener might know. They put together 50 studies of over 171,000 subjects, and they asked the question, what is comprehension like for the same story on a computer, laptop, or print? And they have done this in 2018 and 2024 with handheld devices. That was the newer one. But what they find is that, by and large, the comprehension questions about sequence and detail, there's no way the people who are using a laptop are able to recall that.
Oh, interesting.
So their ability to gather sequence is because, they're skimming, right? And then there's the second part of that. One study was, so Salmeron's group did the big meta-analysis, and then an Israeli researcher asked the question to these digital natives, what do you think you're better at? And they say, well, we know we're better in the screen. Yeah. And she says, why? And they said, well, because we're faster. So this great error in society that thinks that speed is the equivalent of either memory or intelligence or comprehension is completely false when it comes to reading. It's not that you don't have to have fluency. I even wrote a book, for God's sake, on dyslexia and fluency. But you absolutely have to be able to have time to think. And the skimming mode that is encouraged intrinsically by the affordances of screens, this is a problem. Now, I don't want to be neglecting what Sherry Turkle, who's across the river, across the Charles, said years ago, and I quote her all the time because it's so right. It's not that we're opposed to technology or to innovation, for heaven's sakes, but what we are opposed to is when you innovate without asking what it will disrupt or diminish.
Unintended consequences.
Exactly. And these are not only unintended, they are unthought of. They didn't try to think. And that's what my message to the world of technology. And my one son is an artist, and my other son has worked for Google for 9 years. I said, we're talking about the ethics of AI. We have, as a society, a responsibility to ask what an IRB asks researchers.
Oh my gosh, yes.
What will the consequences be for your subjects?
At what expense?
At what expense? What is the impact? And so technology has gone for all these last years ahead with the assumption that they're doing, I really want to give credit, with the assumption that innovation will advance society. I think that was, especially in the beginning, out of an altruistic belief in technology. But now we have all this evidence, especially in the last 10 years, that our children especially are being affected in negative ways in the development of language and attention. Because, Jerry, of that distraction that you were talking about earlier, Linda, I'm blanking on Linda's last name, from Microsoft 20 years ago, used the term continuous partial attention as one of the problems that she saw for children. This is the problem for everyone. Yeah. We all have continuous partial attention. And I look and I think we can't waste, quote, a minute without our cell phone. But what is it doing to our brain's capacity? Just as you asked me the question about film, we have lost the capacity to actually see things and think about them in time. We're moving.
So how important is nuance as a human being in context?
You know, nuance needs to be inferred. Nuance doesn't lie on the surface. Nuance lies below the surface to be interpreted and found and discovered.
I wasn't expecting that. That's a nice answer.
Well, you asked me a good question, and I hope to respond with a good answer because, and it's almost just to go back to nuance, there is nuance in your question.
Yeah.
And so I really believe, like Marilyn Robinson, and David Brooks, actually, something goes missing. Beauty goes missing, said David Brooks. And Marilyn Robinson said, beauty is part of what is in written language, to be discovered, to add to the experience of the reader. And so I would say that nuance and beauty require a level of perception that is impossible if you're skimming.
Yeah. And so important for professions where people may not even realize it's going to help them in their future careers.
That's right.
I can train therapists to know how to do CBT, but if there's no nuance to what they're doing, you know.
And it doesn't mean you don't want CBT.
Exactly, right.
And this is the way I feel about technology. It's not that I don't want technology. I want technology. Why do we have the opportunity, three of us, to meet and give away our best thoughts this moment, right? This moment. Our thoughts will change, and they do change.
Yeah.
But this moment, we have to have what I call, not, in fact, other researchers have called it, it's not my term, but digital wisdom. And digital wisdom takes some effort and time on the part of the innovators. So I turn to them. And as I said, my one son, I work for Google, and my daughter-in-law, all of these, one daughter-in-law is, you know, is at Yale and really trying to figure a lot of philosophical and very practical questions. And the others, practical questions in technology. They're both really doing service that will help us answer questions from two very different perspectives. But I believe it's only when we are trying hard to figure out what Sherry Turkle said, what will it disrupt? What will it diminish? What will it atrophy?
I think we also need to bring folks who are going to be users into the room.
Yes.
Especially those who have disabilities, who rely on these technologies to have these conversations. You know, our great friend and colleague, Dr. Luis Perez from CAST, speaks a lot about this. He is a user of digital technologies because his sight and vision has diminished over the years. And it's a different perspective than I can ever imagine, as thoughtful as I can be as I'm creating or assisting. I can't live that experience. And to bring folks into the room who struggle with reading, especially. You know, I always say I learn more from the students I work with than I do from the books I read. Because asking them the questions, getting curious and learning more about their experience and letting them articulate, that becomes therapeutic actually for them to share.
I'm sure.
And it's brilliant. And I'm cognizant of time and I don't want to lose two really important things I know we want to talk about. I want us to think about, I mentioned before, educators and caregivers, parents alike, often struggle to understand the nuance, the value, the importance of really high quality reading instruction.
Yeah.
And there's an article, what was it, Jerry, in the Times or the Wall Street Journal you sent to Jillian and I maybe a year ago?
Yeah, I can't remember.
It was about the science of reading, and Jerry sent it to myself.
With Emily Hanford, perhaps, about that, yes.
And a great friend of mine, Jillian Lopez, is a OG expert, and she's wonderful at what she does. Yeah. I want to give her a lot of credit too. And Jerry sent it to us and goes, wait a minute. Educators don't know about the science of reading? He was like in shock.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there's like, we don't have time to go into all of it. I wish we did. Please pick up Dr. Wolf's books to learn more.
Yeah.
But what are some like really important aspects that you think listeners should know?
I think the first, and I really, what I will do, I don't know, with your podcast, I could give them access to an article that I just wrote for Albert Shanker.
That'd be wonderful.
Maybe that would be a good way of doing it.
Thank you.
And it actually connects to this whole idea of what is best for, especially with UDL, for heaven's sakes, each individual with their particular strengths and particular weaknesses. Now, you recall that I said that my son, Ben, who is this amazing artist, oh my goodness, I'm so proud of him, but he was not easy. He was so dyslexic, is so dyslexic. And I learned how he thought, how he reacted, and how he dealt with failure. And it was so important for him to teach me years ago the beauty and importance of engagement. And he was taught, I won't say where in Boston, but by a person who was really what was then called and still called whole language. And the idea that was then, that and still is, that the alphabetic principle is best induced by the reader, by them having experiences with good books, and over time they would get it. They would make the Helen Keller epiphany on their own. That was the induction. Now, balanced literacy, especially in the beginning, said, well, maybe we can help it a little with some attention to letter sound correspondence rules, but it really wasn't systematic at all. Now, the science of reading is actually many disciplines coming together, especially over, I would say, more 50 years, but most people are thinking 20 years. But it's when people actually like me at Tufts were given very large grants from the National Institute for Child Health and Human Development, especially under a man named Reed Lyon, and they're Brett Miller now, all these wonderful people were saying, put your money where your mouth is in terms, especially in my area with my colleagues, Robin Morris and Maureen Lovett. We wanted to say, we can do better. How can we take the information we have from cognitive science, in my case, cognitive neuroscience, and apply it to the building of interventions? Now, those interventions are certainly based on the alphabetic principle, and that is, let's say, a phonics approach is one of the major pieces, but goes beyond that. And I'm going to use a term that most people in the science of reading are only now beginning to hear. It's called multi-component intervention. So, of course, we put a lot of emphasis on the phonics principles of making sure the child knows these letter-sound correspondence rules. But unlike a lot of these programs that call themselves science of reading, they actually only are doing phonics and phonemes, or phoneme awareness. They are not connecting it to meaning, to affect, to what I would call the rest of the language systems.
Wow.
So I have been trying to have people, I use the acronym POSSUM, so they think phonology, certainly, orthography. The PO is like every phonics approach, but that it is never not connected to the semantic networks. I'm not talking about vocabulary list, 10 words at the end of a week that you spell and you learn. No, what are the words that are connected
I'm
to
smiling
what you're
so big
teaching?
because when I was in the classroom, that's what I did.
This is so important. The POS, and then you're connecting it to syntax. And so we use the same words. Now, I'm talking about a program that was invented at Tufts called RAVO, and we now have recreated it in the last 3 years, so it's much longer. But we tested it in Boston, and we have the best results in the world. But anyway.
And I actually, that was when we first met years ago
That's
when I
right,
was in the
years.
classroom.
Wow.
And I integrated into my work too.
And this is the word, integration.
Yes.
So we integrate all these phonics principles, all these phonemes, but with meaning, with syntax, with morphology. No one used to know what the smallest unit of meaning, a morpheme. Now everybody thinks, even some people gave me, I'm not kidding, bumper stickers that say morphemes are sexy. It was such a gift. That was from Mount
We might have to bring
Mount
those
St.
back.
Joseph. But the possum is like expanded understanding of the science. This was science. But you see, possum is another way of saying the foundational skills are bigger than phonics. And so a lot of the people who love stories and books should feel at home learning about this because it's to be immediately connected to story. So this multi-component instruction is integrating all of possum with stories, we call them minute stories, that then over time incorporate the deep reading processes.
I was just going to add, and I was
Wow.
like, you probably already have this integrated, but, thinking about smaller chunks of reading
Exactly.
to allow for and to kind of guide that process of pause.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We believe that deep reading begins at the start. So this is an approach that we have in RAVO, a colleague, Maureen Lovett, but what the intervention data, this is, now I'm going to talk about just 1 minute. Our data show that this approach is better than a phonics-only approach. And certainly the phonics-only approach is better than thinking that the kids are going to induce the alphabetic principle on their own. So 40% of our kids are not going to induce it. 60% of the kids, no matter what, Gene Shaw said this, no matter what you give, they're going to learn. But 40%, and depending on your neighborhood,
Wow.
I can predict what's going to happen by your zip code.
No.
That is wrong. We have equity issues all over the place.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say one last thing. The technology that is so helpful, when used correctly, we in our new RAVO, even our old RAVO had something called Speed Wizards. What we are doing is we are giving the teacher everything organized in a digital portal. So she or he, it's all there. Differentiation for this child. You just look it up. Every single day, the script is there. Everything's there. But the material for the child is print. And then when they need work on fluency, we do have a game that engages them and helps them practice. My colleague Lynn Miller used to do all this in Boston years ago to work on it. Stephanie Gottwald, all these wonderful, oh my God, the people who in Boston who helped RAVO.
Incredible.
They are just so beautiful. And I'll never forget the mayor of Malden asked us to bring this program to his summer school.
Yeah.
He did not use his budget for his carpeting. He used his carpet budget to bring RAVO to Malden. Now, I hope you're still around somewhere.
Yeah.
Maybe not. I'm sure he's not the mayor anymore. But
Priorities, yeah.
But this was, what I'm saying is technology is not the enemy, nor is it, however, only a tool. It changes the brain. That's the point. You have to have technological wisdom.
Yeah.
That's where UDL has been from the start brilliant. It's matching. It's the match. What is the wise use of technology?
And the integration in the design, there's so many educators that do a beautiful job of of proactively anticipating the needs
Yes.
and building it in from the beginning into the environment rather than as an extra.
That's right.
Right? Rather than saying,
integrate.
This student might need audiobooks, so we'll bring it in just for that one student. It becomes a part of the culture, which helps to understand variability, and it goes back to understanding different perspectives and approaches.
Right.
But I really appreciate all of this on so many levels, and I'm curious to know more about what else are you currently working on right now?
Well, when we realized that ReidConnect was only for 1 year, and that was insufficient for me to really bring in our work on deep reading. We have changed it so that we're working to have a 3-year program. So we really go after empathy, critical thinking, inference, but in the most fun way. There's a little girl named Magnolia, and I've never, ever realized how important the characters. If you remember, there's Ms. Mim. Okay, I'm just going to tell you about one character, actually 2 characters, and then I'll stop.
Well, it's like a spider web, too.
It's
so thinking about the characters that go along that.
Exactly. The spider web is where you put all the meanings of words, right? So Ms. Mim, and I will confess to the world, I was trying to say, what if Bette Midler could be this amazingly
I could see that.
active spider web, all these things, big eyelashes, big smiling face. And Ms. Mim stands for many interesting meanings. Now, linguistics, that's polysemy, right? But the reality is that so many of the primer words. Oh, and Melissa Orkin is doing all this training in Boston. I should remind, because they talk about Ms. Mim all the time. But Ms. Mim teaches children that the words could have as many meaning as she has legs.
Oh, wow.
So you have a word like bat. Oh, you have syntax. Anyway. So Ms. Mim, Magnolia, imitates Ms. Mim. And then she imitates Mayor Mick, who is M.A. Interesting Means. Now, he has an afro, and she is this little Howley girl in Hawaii, and she's imitating. And I'm thinking, this is reading.
Yeah.
This is reading because she's dyslexic. She hated what was happening in the public school, and she went to the school for dyslexia. And by and large, I thought, okay, our job is to engage attention so that they will end up loving reading, no matter how hard it is, that they will love it. So all these characters.
I just want to say for the educators out there too, because I hear this too often from a lot of young people I work with, and even older people looking back on their lives, they say distinctly, I can remember the time where a teacher would sit with me and I'd be doing my reading assessment and they expected nothing of me. And I felt the energy from them, just knowing that I couldn't get through it. And years later, this is what they remember.
That they
and
were.
I'm like tearing up thinking about it. But just like that story just is such a beautiful contrast to the experience of a lot of struggling readers and learners. And not just with dyslexia. This is a whole podcast for another time.
Absolutely.
But the overlaps between ADHD and dyslexia and reading challenges are huge.
They are so big.
And it's leaving a lot of educators and parents kind of lost because they're not sure what to do. But I would argue, and in my experience, and we could talk about this forever too, I would integrate similar practices as I learned from ReidConnect into across the grade levels. It wasn't just for younger learners. And I would use that as my entry point to excite learners about the beauty of words.
Exactly. A courtship with language.
Absolutely. It's so beautifully said. I love that. But it's, I just want to share with the folks out there, we're grateful for all the work everybody is doing.
Everybody.
Because it's so complex, and there's so many aspects of things. But one of the things that really moved me was from your books, your writing, your work over the years is the importance of being excited about reading.
Exactly.
And even at the simplistic level, right? Sharing the love of it, it becomes infectious.
And every child can begin at 6 months to love reading, even though they don't have a clue. And parents say, they don't understand a thing I say. that's not what's important.
Yes.
They're going to start loving being with you, loving them, and reading, and they hear your voice. And over time, they're going to learn words they never could have imagined because the world of books gives them not just words, but concepts that go with words. It's the most beautiful, inexpensive way to introduce a child to the love of the world.
It's a beautiful thing. And I remember you saying that, or maybe it was in the book, but like it's a emotional bond.
It is.
Between a parent or caregiver and a child. And when I heard that, I was like, oh my God, that's so true. It's like, it's an association.
Yeah.
It is.
And not
That's
only
exactly it.
And as you said, it's not only good for language development, and it's really important cognitively to be read to. It's important for the cognitive development, but it's an emotional, almost like a nostalgic memory that could be a positive one that could,
And if you are going to be dyslexic, as my son was, and one of the people who works now in Curious Learning and sends tablets around the world and is teaching literacy in Africa. Anyway, she's amazing, Stephanie Gola. But she once said to me that the kids who are read to, who come to us at the clinic when we had one at Tufts, the ones who are read to, they're so much easier because they already love books.
That's fascinating.
They love books. They've had. And when Stephanie said that, I thought, oh, she's so right. So we're giving this connectivity. Now, I have a grandchild, first grandchild, 18 months old. That child has, in all likelihood, she's going to be dyslexic, right? In all likelihood, the genes are there. And what I love is that she now knows books so well. I showed her a little caterpillar in a book on a bullfrog, and she got up. She went to a bookshelf and pulled out the very hungry caterpillar.
Wow.
She'd already made
association.
an association. Now, she has very little language, like her father, by the way. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. I tell them it'll be fine. But in all likelihood, she will be dyslexic. But she's already loving books.
That's amazing.
And so that's what we want every child to have. And the parent who is not necessarily fully literate, they can make up those words. Give them in Spanish or Portuguese or Korean or Chinese, whatever it is.
Wow.
But this love that you said, the emotional bond, give it to them.
I love that.
Give it to them.
Again, we can go off and talk about this for a whole separate episode. Maybe one day we will. But, even if reading is tricky, or if your English is not your first language and you're trying to work with your child learning English, music and song is another way to build pattern recognition and rhythm and prosody and so much that can translate so beautifully to reading too.
Well, I think she's setting me up, Jerry. Don't you think? Before we began this interview, we were talking about music. I had to bring it back. She's learning music again, and I'm learning music again. But the reality is very serious. And we did a study in Boston. Kathy Moritz did this. And then Ani Patel at Tufts and Ola, who's now at BU, Ozernov Palchik, did all these music studies. Very basically, we looked at one charter school that used music, and they used the Suzuki method for kindergartners and had, music every day. And another charter school that was not devoted to music, and I think, those horrible older books, whatever it was, I can't remember it was, but they had music a little bit once a week. That was it. So we then compared everything else the same, neighborhood, all these things. Kathy Moritz, I wish she was here, she would laugh. We really had to work hard to match. And the kids at the end of first grade who'd had the music did better. Wow. And then Ola and Ani Patel did all these studies, and they're showing that what's really going on is rhythm. Rhythm is, if you think about the time between phonemes, rhythm in music, the time between notes and the time between phonemes is related. So, what we really, and I just love, Ani Patel has written, wrote a beautiful book on music and the brain, but he and Ola is very sophisticated. Now, what does that mean to our schools today that say, we need 90 minutes of this, 90 minutes of that, so we can't, I'm so sorry, we can't do music, or we can't do art, or we can't do sports, or we can't do recess. I say, please, I want you to just have this research. You keep music, you're going to do better in reading.
Music, movement.
Oh
an
my gosh.
opportunity to reset. It activates our brains in ways that, oh my goodness.
I
Isn't that fascinating that we grew up in a time when we had that and now we've quote unquote progressed as a society, and yet we don't have the things that we need that we had. Maybe we didn't realize why we needed it back then.
Well, we didn't know why.
Yeah.
But
maybe it's intuitive. Yeah.
Well, but those intuitions were based on a lot of good 19th century insights too.
Yeah.
But then some of those insights were wrong.
Sure, of course.
And but leave it to the French. Was the 18th century French? They gave phonics basically to the elite. Everybody else had to learn by induction on the Bible.
No way.
Right. And so this was this unnecessary, unnatural fight between whole language and balanced literacy and phonics. I really, please, the reading brain can teach us that it is in the systematic, explicit, it has to be explicit, instruction of all of this being integrated, that's what the brain does, and that's what our teaching should do. But everybody needs to learn a little bit more. And the science of reading cannot be so narrowly defined as phonics or phonics plus phonemes. Or make it a checklist. Oh my God.
Oh my gosh, no checklists. Even though I'm an executive function person, I'm not a fan of checklists either.
This is what's happening. We did phonemes today.
We checked it off.
We did spelling on Friday. We did morphemes in third grade.
Going back to Jerry's favorite word, everything is so nuanced, right? And everybody, different people might need different things at different times. And
they do.
And we need to listen and we need to pay attention.
There's such an overlap with psychotherapy and how it helps people. And I was teaching my students in class, and one of my students gave this amazing presentation and outline of an article I gave them about how important integration of different theories is when you're working with someone. If you stick to one theory too much, too rigidly, it actually doesn't help. It could backfire, and people may not benefit from therapy if you're not able to integrate different ideas and concepts. So there's an overlap in other fields as well.
Certainly, and both fields need they need knowledge plus flexibility as it matches the individual need. This is an equation. If if there's only one denominator, that's not going to match every individual numerator.
Exactly.
Well, we like to end each episode thinking about something you're hopeful for and maybe something you're grateful for, just to kind of wrap up. And I know we can, again, expand and extend this conversation, and I would love that. But in the interest of time, what's something that you're looking forward to and hopeful for?
Just even being back in Boston with the two of you is just a sign of hope. Talking to all of those, 200-300 students at BU yesterday about how I want them to be themselves, not a Chat GPT self. Know who you are and be that self. And so my last question last night was, how can we hope when, all of society is going a different way? I say, you're the hope. Every single person has something that they can do to bring the world to a better place by never forgetting our humanity, a shared humanity. And reading, no matter, even if it's on a medium that I don't necessarily like, read anyway. Read anyway. Just leave yourself behind and respect the integrity of others and their viewpoints. So, may your work here be multiplied. May it be multiplied.
Oh, thank you so much.
So beautiful. And I'm so grateful for you, for the work that you've done, that's influenced me and so many, and all of the young people and learners whose lives it's touched. We're so grateful for your dedication and your passion and your incredibly intricate and precise and thoughtful work that you've done in the sciences. It is incredibly noticed, and we're so grateful for it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
we spread it. Yes, spread it. Multiply.
Thank you. I'm so grateful I get to meet you in person and really know your energy, because it's special and it's important. And
And thank you for not asking me all the questions you had on that list.
I didn't ask one question.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the ReidConnect-Ed podcast. Please remember that this is a podcast intended to educate and share ideas, but it is not a substitute for professional care that may be beneficial to you at different points of your life. If you are in need of support, please contact your primary care physician, local hospital, educational institution, or support staff at your place of employment to seek out referrals for what may be most helpful for you. Ideas shared here have been shaped by many years of training, incredible mentors, research, theory, evidence-based practices, and our work with individuals over the years, but is not intended to represent opinions of those we work with or who we are affiliated with. The ReidConnect-Ed podcast is hosted by siblings Alexis Reid and Dr. Gerald Reid. Original music is written and recorded by Gerald Reid. The recording was done by Cybersound Studios. If you want to follow along on this journey with us, the ReidConnect-Ed podcast will be releasing new episodes every 2 weeks each season. So please subscribe for updates and notifications. Feel free to also follow us on Instagram at ReidConnect-Ed podcast. That's ReidConnect-Ed podcast, and Twitter at ReidConnect-Ed. We are grateful for you joining us and look forward to future episodes. In the meanwhile, be curious, be open, and be well.